welcome all members of the public watching on television to the November regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board. Nadia, could we please have a roll call?
Yeah, Don Black.
Here.
Travis Oakley.
Here.
Raymond Lathan.
Here.
Anna Sheff. Here. Margie Dunn. Here. Marcus Simmons. Pat Darcy.
Here.
Sonny Lizzo.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The first item, or the second item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the 10-5 meeting 2021. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? Are there any recommendations, added, corrections that you wish Nadia to make to the minutes?
I move we accept the minutes as written.
We have a motion to accept the minutes as written.
Second.
A motion seconded. Do we need a roll call for this?
No, sir.
All those in favor?
Aye.
You don't
Opposed?
need to vote, do you?
Okay, the third item is a new business, is the Stars and Stripes LLC, represented by John Thomas Engineering, is requesting the final site approval of the Tyler Homes on the lake, what is that, lake?
Phase
Lake Phase 5, a planned unit development located on, of 54 units, residential plan located in the R-10A. The land is approximately 11.49 acres, and it is R-10A zoning, and it's located to the south of Gracie Farms Road and to the east of Washington Post Road, located in Ward 5. Do we have a staff review of that development?
Chair went over all the typical stats for development. It is zoned R-10A. It's a PUD. Average lot size is 9,267 square feet. So you can do PUD designation. Not any new streets. Streets have been installed in this subdivision for quite a while now. It is utilities are provided by the city of Bern, water, wastewater, and electric. There's your site. The lake looking very green. Copy of the final subdivision plan was included in your packet. We reviewed the plan. It has met all the rules and regulations of our subdivision ordinance, and has satisfied the criteria. And so we are recommending that we approve the final subdivision plat for Tyler Home and Lake Phase 5. We did receive a bond. Nadia?
Yes.
John, thank you. And it's been approved by Public Works and Utilities Department. So we are recommending approval. Everything is in order. I don't know why nothing is working. Okay. We'll do it that way. I'll answer any questions if you have it. The applicant is here also. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do any members of this board have questions concerning this development? At this point, if the applicant wishes to address the board, he may do so. I see we have a member of the public. Does a member of the public wish to ask any questions on this development, either for or against? At this point, the chair would like to recognize a motion to accept the development as proposed.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion that's been seconded. Nadia, could we please have a roll call? Remember, this is a final approval, and this does not go before the
A couple new copies of that.
Don Black.
Yeah.
The front cover page
Travis
includes
Oakley.
Yes.
the lot that we were
Raymond
screwing
Lathan.
with.
Yes.
Anna Sheff.
The
Yes.
front page
Margie
excludes
Dunn.
that lot.
Yes. Pat
Just a
Dorsey,
site map,
Yes.
yeah. Which
Tony
started the
Rizzo,
whole.
Yeah.
Sure know what you're talking about. You'll see
motion
it.
passes.
Okay, and the chair would like to note that this passed unanimously. We now come to a Sydes Construction project in the Bluewater Rise area. And this part of this plan is going to be a final approval that the applicant is asking for, and it's a part of a multi-phase development. This phase is occupied on approximately 17.55 acres in the R-8 Residential District. The site is located to the north of County Line Road and to the west of Old Airport Road. The approval draft of this was done in 2022 for 2022 plan and the zoning board meetings. Now, this proposal is free. We know that there is a water flow problem for the fire department. And we also know that you are in the process of getting an easement from something called, I believe, the Forestry Trust. What is the status of that easement, and when can we expect the loop to be completed so that this development plan has adequate water rate for the fire department standards? Right now, it's 30% below. I'm not sure if that's as it stands right now or before this phase is developed, but we understand from the chief fire board himself and Shell, Sonny Loser and myself met with them, and we are told that the water flow rate is not adequate per accepted norms. How is that easement going, Mr. Director?
So, we're going to do a staff review and then have this as part of our discussion?
I believe it's appropriate because it's an issue of safety. I'm going to take this part out of order right now because many members of this board currently are not comfortable proceeding, approving a development plan that doesn't have adequate water for adequate fire safety.
Okay, I think I'd like to go on record at least saying we should have our staff review, follow normal protocols, have our staff review, and then when it comes back to the board for discussion, that would be an appropriate time, I feel, to have this sort of discussion.
Well, I can understand your point is sticking to regular order. However, that might not be necessary in this case. If I will accede to your wishes if you want that done.
Well,
we could do that. So
from a procedural point of view, I think we're obligated to do that.
Okay, well, we'll do that then, Raymond.
And then we can have board discussion and have this sort of,
Okay.
that'd be my preference.
Okay, well, I accede to that, but I don't have a problem with that.
I'll give it a quick overview of what we're doing. We have that discussion. No problem. So as the chair said, located site, Monterey Cave Phase 1 of Bluewater Rise, 17.5 acres, 9354 is the average square foot of the lot. We have some new streets being proposed in this one, again, all served by the city of New Bern on utilities. There is your site, going in nicely. Subdivision was provided in your packet. Staff did review the original. Where the heck did it go? Where am I? General plan was approved in 2018. Received some extensions that we got passed down to us from the state, so it does meet the 2-year requirement for general plan approval to final approval. We have reviewed it for consistency with our codes. It meets all the rules and regulations. Staff is recommending approval. And we have the bond in hand, and everything has been approved by Public Works and Utility Department. Everything meets the rules and regs of our ordinance and requirements for final approval of a planned unit development subdivision. And to answer your question, I spoke with Jordan Hughes, the city engineer, around the end of last week. And the easement is being finalized. He expects to be under construction by the end of the year, beginning of next year, for the new water line. When that'll be completed, I don't know.
Okay, I would like to direct my question towards that easement. Normally easements are granted relatively quickly. You're going to get an easement from the Forestry, is it the Forestry Trust?
It's a coastal land trust, I think.
And what is that? Is that a special environmentally protected trust that requires more work? Perhaps Ms. Mosley shed some light on this?
Unfortunately, I'm not very knowledgeable about the status of this easement or the parties involved.
Typically, easements are granted either from the DOT or maybe the county or maybe the city. This is a private trust, apparently, whose purpose is probably a nonprofit organization with their purpose being to protect the environment. What is the size of this easement?
Don't know.
The terms of the construction for the water line is about how many feet, and the water lines are put several feet deep, I guess. So it's a matter of digging a trench and to connect the loop, to connect the water system so there's more flow rate, more pressure. That's essentially the design, is it not?
Again, I'm not here to approve water lines, easements, or any kind of water distribution, kind of subdivision plat. We need to meet the rules of the subdivision ordinance, which this proposal does. If you have any questions on what Chapter 15 says, the land use ordinance, I can answer those. All that is beyond the scope of what we're doing here tonight.
So can you stipulate for the record that if we do approve it today, by the time they start laying foundations and whatnot, the water easement and the water correction would have been completed or nearly so completed? If it's going to be started in December, working their way through early January.
I can stipulate that it meets the rules of the subdivision ordinance, which is why we're here tonight, which is what this board has purview over. You don't have any purview over water distribution, easements, flow rates. All that is handled by different departments in the city. All of it's been reviewed and approved, and that's what I can answer to you tonight.
Yeah, but we do understand from the fire marshal directly that the flow rate is inadequate.
So
Presently.
do we have, I mean, you've been presented with flow tests to?
Yeah.
I guess I'm confused.
Yeah, Sonny Aluzo and myself were presented, we were told it was 30% under the accepted capacity.
So I guess maybe what I will say, I hear the concern from a planning and zoning point of view, just not unlike we tell applicants and members of the public all the time, we have to stay within our purview.
No, if it's an issue of safety and we are convinced of that, we do not have to stand in that. We have what I consider a flawed sign-off on the application. If a critical measure such as the flow rate of water is inadequate, that would trump any kind of thing, well, that's a problem because it's signed off on. It's a matter of conscience, and then at that point, you might as well claim something akin to a Nuremberg defense.
Well,
So-
Mr. Chair.
Let me clarify inadequate. But I spoke to the fire chief a few days ago. Fire flow is adequate. It's very consistent with other
It's not
flows throughout the
consistent with what
city.
we were told.
I'm sure he clarified that, which is what I was told in those conversations. And so inadequate is not the correct term to use. So I just want to put that on the record, since we're putting things on the record that aren't consistent with conversations that I've had with department heads and the fire chief and the fire marshal. So just so we know what we're doing here today.
Well,
And Mr. Chair, I would like to illuminate this point. What is before the board tonight is a final subdivision plan.
Yes.
And they're by law, which we are bound to uphold. There are certain considerations for this board at this moment, considering the stage in the process.
I understand your
And-
legal point.
And these aren't suggestions, this is the law. And to do anything outside of that, this commission, this board would be breaking the law. So I would strongly encourage the members of this board to focus their attention on whether the plan as it is before you tonight meets the rules that are outlined, and I think it's 1579B. And if there's some part of that subsection that this plan fails to satisfy, then certainly discussion is appropriate.
Well,
However, if you analyze the elements that are supposed to be in this plan and find it to be sufficient, I understand your conscience and I understand your rationale, but I think this board is tasked with applying the law as it relates to this particular set of facts.
what I was going to propose, I spoke to Jeffrey. I wanted perhaps to have the applicant remove his application at this time and table it. We do want to approve this plan, but we want to approve this plan in such a way that it is as safe for the people that will be living in those homes. And what I would suggest that we do today is table it, and at the next meeting, I think our Director of Development Services would have more time to finalize this. This easement has been going on for months now, and I do not understand the problems with this easement. And right now, you tell us that you're not prepared to answer any question what the status of this easement is. We do want to approve the plan, but we want to approve the plan at such time that we know it's safe. This city has a history of a bad fire. My associate Sonny Aluzo worked across the street from the Ash Building near Washington Square where the infamous Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire happened, where young Italian and Jewish immigrants were jumping out of 9-story windows to escape the fire. We don't want to be party to another kind of disaster like that, and that's why why I'm asking for some time to get this thing. It's a matter of safety and a matter of conscience. And I do not think it's unreasonable to table this resolution for a month so we get sure that this easement will be processed accordingly. Right now, we have no guarantee or assurances. They've been working on this easement, and I don't understand why an easement such as this is taking so much time to get.
I'd like to ask a question. So what is our obligation now that this application has been submitted, received by the board, it's on the agenda? What is our obligation time-wise before we have to act on it? Is it 60 days?
You have to act in 60 days.
Okay.
I won't have any answers in 30 days. It's going to be the same answer.
That's what I was about to say. So I
We
guess.
may have an easement in place, but I won't know construction schedules.
So what I was
All
going
I'm
to say.
saying is we want to get the easement in place.
It's outside the purview of the board.
So all that
Yeah.
noise kind of aside, what I was going to say from a procedural point of view, we kind of have two options. We either have a motion to deny this application, we vote on that, and if it's successful, we deny it, which I think is unfair to the applicant, given that they've met all of the requirements of the land use ordinance. Or we have a motion to approve, we vote on it, and if it fails, then somehow or another we've got to act on this tonight. I think tabling doesn't do anything, because if in 60 days we haven't acted on it, then it's deemed approved.
Well, I disagree with you on tabling. We did a tabling in the racetrack road development, and the parties involved, the developer and whatnot, heard the concerns of the public, and in the next meeting we approved it. Everybody was very happy because they increased the green space.
Understood.
And so there are times that tabling things does work. It does give both sides of the argument time to work out differences, and part of our purview is we are the planning and zoning board, and we're supposed to do development in such a way that it promotes harmony in the community.
So the difference with that previous application, in my opinion, and I wasn't in favor of tabling that, but the difference with that application was that the applicant had the ability to effect a change for that application that solved the perceived problem.
And
The applicant does not have that ability in this
Yeah.
particular case.
No, but in this particular case, it's not an issue of appearance, it's an issue of public safety, and I think public safety trumps
appearance.
Yeah, and public safety is in the realm of the public safety folk, right? Fire, police.
And we're told
So-
that's unsafe.
utilities.
So I guess what I'm saying is
I disagree with you on what the fire chief said, and I've spoken with him many times, and it is not a
Well,
public
there's
safety.
three of
Water
us
pressure is not a public safety issue. That's what I.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, here's my opinion on what we're talking about. I don't necessarily disagree with you. If we've got a true water pressure problem, and I haven't seen the flow data, it doesn't matter.
Can
But
you give you the flow data?
certainly, you can give me that. I don't know that it means anything to me without running the hydraulic calculations. I mean, because it depends on diameter of pipe, length of line, and all that. So all that aside, I guess my point is procedurally, we have to do something with this application tonight.
Within 60 days.
Or within 60 days. So if we don't act on it tonight and we table it and it comes before us next month, I feel certain we'll be having this same discussion again, because I'm certain that we won't know the status of this easement.
Oh,
at that
I mean,
point.
how can you speculate that? That sounds arbitrary and capricious.
Well,
So-
that would give you time to go back to the fire chief and say, hello, why did you say this to one person and something else to another?
Yeah.
To satisfy Don, if nothing else, to make
Also,
sure that those numbers.
Yeah, but also absolutely nothing to do with the application. The application is.
No, I disagree with that. It's pertinent to the application. That's our objection. That's the root cause why we are concerned about it.
So if we have a motion to
Table.
disapprove this application, we would have to give some grounds based on the land use ordinance. I don't think we can do that.
No, but I think we could table it to give the city and the staff more time to get that data to us so that we're more comfortable approving it.
I don't know that we gain anything by that,
Well,
but if that's what the
you're
board,
not
but if
gonna
that's
hear
what the board chooses to vote on and approve, I don't know that I would be in favor of that, but obviously if that's the decision of the board,
I'm not
then we can
gonna
do
be
that.
so capricious when it comes to safety and people's lives. You've got a development going on the edge of a forest. Where I come from, Westchester County, the forests were primarily hemlock. In the 1980s, there was an insect blight, really developed. You go to those forests today, you see a lot of brown wood there. It's a source of concern for the county I moved from, the forest fires. And this is just north of New York City. So we have a lot of forestry around that property. We've had forest fires in eastern North Carolina. Are you comfortable if the flow rate's below adequate? You have a development of several hundred people living across County Line Road, where it'd be hard to make a fire break? I can't say that I am.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is procedurally, I hear what you're saying, and I work on design projects every day.
I think human life is more important than procedure.
Okay. So,
Yes, please, Paul. You're
well, no, so I think what I would like for us to do is, I mean, we can talk until we're blue in the face. We're not gonna know the answer to any of these questions tonight. I think we either table it or we don't, or we approve it or we don't, or you not or we don't. That's our
Well, I'm in
options.
favor of tabling because that gives everybody the opportunity to be on the same board. Mr. Thomas, were you aware of this problem with respect to the water flow rate? Were you advised of this at all?
I don't have a clue what you're talking about.
Okay.
You mind if I speak to the matter?
No, please.
This project has been through every permitting process you can think of.
And every
When
permit,
this project was designed, we provided a model of the flows to the city for their review. This is the first I've heard of any issues out there, and I'm not aware of any issues out there with this particular subdivision. Also, the plat's in order. The project paved. They want to start pulling building permits in the next 2 weeks out there to build houses. The public utilities is fine with everything that's been put out there. I am simply not aware of a flow problem out there on this particular development. The other thing too, the easement, I'm not sure I know what or where you're talking about it, but it is outside the bounds of this subdivision and it has nothing to do with this subdivision. I do know that there is some long-range plans to deliver more water in that sector of the county out there, including Colors and Bluewater Rise as we move through this. But that has nothing to do with this particular project right now, what we're doing.
some months ago, Mr. Thomas, we had different sections of Public Works give us reviews. We were concerned about the record pace of development that's been going on in New Bern, and we want to make sure there are different capacities for things like sewer, electric.
I agree with you 100%, and
we were
there's areas
advised
in
at
town
that
that
time.
don't meet that, and there are some improvements being made by the public works folks, public utility folks down the road with tanks and stuff like that to improve that as time goes along. But that's not the case here. We're not
There is
seeing
the
that.
case that the water rate that's going to serve that development is presently inadequate according to our meetings that we've had with the fire department.
Well,
That's not part of your purview.
I know all those guys personally, and usually I'm the first one that gets the phone call, and I have heard nothing about anything like that out there.
I don't know when exactly the fire department reviewed the water flow rate, but that was something that came out in our meeting.
Specifically on Monitor Point.
No, it was a generic kind of development in this area as it proceeds.
Yeah.
We'll have an
It's
issue.
very doubtful that
Yeah.
if there is a problem, which I don't think there is in this particular development, that it's not going to get solved by the next meeting.
The three of us attended a meeting, and he said to ourselves that the water capacity is 30% below accepted rates. And I'm sorry you didn't know about it. We just found out about it the past couple months. And
Let's give them numbers that he gave us. I think
I mean,
that
there's
makes more
tremendous
sense.
investment out here. I mean, the roads are paved, the utilities are in, the fire hydrants are there. I mean, it's all there. And
There's
another
something to
30
do.
days would be an unnecessary delay, in my opinion.
Mr. Chair, I think it's important in this conversation, if you're considering tabling, that's fine, but it may be important for you to connect the information that you think you want to obtain to one of the relevant considerations in whether you approve the final plan or not. And if the information you're trying to obtain isn't relevant to one of those considerations, then maybe you're in a position to make a decision tonight.
okay, so what you're suggesting that the motion table should include for next month is we're requesting the planning department in conjunction with the fire department concerning the plan to increase the pressure and when such plan is going to be completed.
No, sir, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is,
suggesting?
in this conversation, okay, we're concerned about water flow. Let us look at what the relevant considerations are for final plat approval. For instance, are the lines of all streets and roads on the plat? Water rates have nothing to do with that. Subsection B, lot lines and lot numbers. Water rates and water consumptions have nothing to do with that consideration. Building envelopes, reservations, all the dimensions should be to the nearest 1/10 of a foot and angles to the nearest minute. Accurate location and description of all monuments and markers. The list goes on. If your request for additional information is relevant to any of those items, then you should probably consider tabling this consideration until the next meeting until you can obtain that information. But if the information you're trying to obtain is not relevant to the things that you have to consider in making the approval of the final plat, then I think this conversation can be concluded.
Well, part of the consideration is for the general harmony of the community.
Can you point to where that is in the code as it relates to the final plat approval? Then that may be an issue for lawmakers and legislators down the road, but the job of this board is to apply the law as it's written tonight, not as we hope or wish it would be in the future.
Jeff, I just have a quick question. And I'm a simpleton, so bear with me here. Obviously, there's a concern. We know that. In your opinion, based on your conversation with the city engineer and the fire chief, I know this, obviously we're not going to have a final answer on this issue in the next 30 days. In your professional opinion, based on those conversations that you've had, as this development moves along, do you see this being an issue? Just, I'm going to ask a flat out question. Is this going to be a safety issue down the road?
Without the necessary improvements at some point, obviously, it will be a safety issue. But the way this board sees, as John was alluding to, this board sees the very end product.
This project started 7 years ago.
Right. And that,
Okay,
and I'm,
all that was, it starts with conversations with the city engineer. Can we provide water? Can we provide sewer to the area? From there, it builds upon
Right.
itself. So we're here, all those answers have been given, right? This subdivision will not create any unsafe conditions in any of our utilities or any of our fire and police coverage, okay? So we're on top of that. Other departments are looking at that constantly. Okay, they look at growth patterns. We're looking at different fire stations in different parts of the city. Okay, so all that happens years in advance before we get here. As John was saying, the streets are in, the utilities are in, the lot lines are there. This final approval it gives them authority to sell a lot to a person so they can live in a home. It will not do anything to reduce any kind of public safety. No one's going to be jumping out of buildings on fire, because of this plat. Now, someone leaves their prior on. I can't do anything about that. But from this point, we're not really talking about it, as the attorney said. Our conversation. There's no amount of information that I can give you that has any bearing on where we are here today.
Jeff, in those conversations you're talking about,
Yes.
is part of that the estimate of how fast it's going to be developed?
Yes.
And
Absorption.
suppose it gets developed faster, what happens?
Well, we're already ahead of that, right? So the loop's
Yeah. I think that's really the concern.
It is.
You know, we understand.
And again,
We'll assume that everything was all calculated
it is.
for X amount of years. And now it's half that.
Mhm.
And part of the X amount of years was that
The
pipe
growth
being
rate was
constructed.
And it'll be under construction by the beginning of the year.
But the point I'm making is, it's really not the same as what you originally agreed on.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, you
We
said-
originally said it was gonna take 10 months to do
Yeah,
it.
and
Now it's
originally,
doing 5
Sonny,
months.
I guess to answer that question, originally that water line was 10 years out, and now it's 2 months out, right? So again,
Part of the reason it's 2 months out is because of
The growth.
the
Well, actually, part of the reason why 2 months out is that Jordan's been working on it for a long time before that, and when it came up, he's like, yeah, we've been working on it, and I'm working on one final easement with the Coastal Conservancy to get through their parcel. So it was already it was already on the books for a year ahead of it.
Jeff, I got one more.
I wish you just hear what I'm saying. I'm answering
No.
your questions, but you gotta keep asking me the same thing.
I just have one other
Yeah.
follow-on. I was listening. I'm
Yeah.
taking everything in that you're saying. My last question, it's kind of a caveat to the first thing I asked. So I know Jordan's closing the final loop.
Yeah.
I think the biggest concern, honestly, with us, is we just want to make sure the loop is closed in an appropriate amount of time. In your professional opinion, do you think the loop is going to be closed in a
Absolutely,
reasonable
yeah.
amount? Okay.
Absolutely.
You
Okay.
basically have to trust that our city is doing what they're supposed to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's
And that's hard to do.
Is it? I mean, this is what we're at.
And that's,
We got
that's
31,000
what,
people that
I
live
mean,
there.
that's how growth happens in a city.
I think we are all saying the same thing, and that basically is, there's nothing wrong, Mr. Thomas, with what you've done. I'm sure it's going to be a fabulous development. The problem we have is with the city. When we talked with the fire chief, he said, we want 1,000 CFM. Right now, in this area, we have about 725 to 750 CFM. It is way lower. It is not critical yet, but it will become that way. That's what got us thinking. And I think if you heard that, you would think too. And it has nothing to do with your subdivision. I think what we're really after is a reassurance from the city that we are going to see adequate water flow to prevent a massive fire. That's our main concern, and it has nothing to do with you. I want you to understand that.
Well, I know what the fire marshal wants, and I know what is in the code as alternatives to the various things. And I do know that the city, since we came in with this development, has been working on a plan to increase the water flows out there, which they will eventually implement, and it will be a lot better. It's also what's in our agreement with them, and it's also what we've represented to the state. But our model doesn't show what you just said, the model that we ran. And I mean, it's a model that we use good scientific engineering judgment when we run these models based on actual flows that we run at the time we do the model. This model is only a couple, 3 years old. The city signed off on it. They signed off on the permits and everything. My client is entitled to his development here. The flows will get worked out. And I can go in places in the city and I can barely get 300 gallons a minute out of some of those hydrants. And the city knows that, and eventually they'll work on it and hopefully improve it. But this is not one of those developments.
One of the things that Chief Floyd told us at our meeting was that he thought the development would not be where it is currently, that it's proceeding much quicker than they otherwise thought, that they thought they would have more time to do it. So that's why there's concern about some of these members to put the brakes on a little bit so they can catch up.
And so, if I may, my point is 30 days isn't going to do that.
No, but 30 days is going to give us more information what the status of this easement is and whatnot, and to give us more reassurance that when we are voting to approve it, which I certainly hope we do, that it's not going to be an unsafe issue. We don't know. I have no idea what's holding up this easement. It's been going on.
And that's not the developer's. It's not in the developer's purview. It's not in our purview.
But isn't it? Well, if we think there's a safety issue, there's nothing that's going to bound me to vote for something like that. And apparently the Public Works has known about this for some time now. I don't know why they can't just be more open about the easement that they need and advise the public of it. I know that there are some, there's at least one that wasn't even aware of this.
And you may vote your conscience, but I feel we are obligated to act on this item.
We're going to act on it, so we table it for 30 days. Does that affect your conscience?
I don't know what we gain by doing that.
I think
we have a valid application before us that meets the requirements of the land use ordinance.
Yeah,
I understand the concerns.
I believe it's flawed.
I understand the concern. The application is not flawed. There's nothing about water in this.
Yeah, well, it should have been. That's a precise point that many of us are making.
I mean, I don't know that I can argue with you on this, Don. And so I would just say that at this point, let's agree to disagree that procedurally we are required to act on this by law.
I don't think we are procedurally required.
I think our attorney has just told us that we have to. So
tell us that.
Okay, I would request that we ask for a motion to table, to disapprove, or to approve.
As I suggested, is that we have a motion table,
well, as chair, I don't think you can make a motion, so.
No, I would suggest to hear a motion to table.
Okay. Are we at a point to do that? I mean, I'm not sure that this conversation, this discussion has taken us any further with any, we're not gaining any knowledge with this, and so if we're going to table.
I take objection to that. The engineer here did not realize there was a problem.
Well, I think you're misrepresenting what Mr. Thomas has said. I think what Mr. Thomas has said is, based on his calculations, there is not a problem.
He wasn't given the information from the fire department.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jeff, can I make one comment? So, obviously,
everybody else is.
Okay. Obviously, we know this is not the last section of Bluewater Rise. Speaking with Mr. Thomas, obviously the next phase is going to be coming in the next couple months. I think based on obviously what we're trying to approve right here or disapprove, I don't think we can disapprove it if it's met all the wickets, because obviously it's been told to us that the water thing is not an issue. That's not that's not what we're talking about here. But what I am gonna suggest is that as the next Bluewater Rise, the next section of Bluewater Rise comes up, I would like to maybe get a little bit more clarity on whether or not the water issue can be fixed by the next phase. I mean, I think that's more than adequate. Obviously, the board is not gonna, this is not gonna go away necessarily, but I also don't wanna punish the developer for this particular phase, because this is something that's not gonna be addressed in 30 days or 60 days. This is gonna be addressed.
The next phase is going to have the same argument. It's going to meet all the requirements of the ordinance.
That's it.
Well, then you push the water.
Everything
before you get that
lies
far.
with the city and their ability to get that water loop in. And we're not hearing anything other than maybe at this point. And that's where the problem lies, if you boil it all down.
Michelle, I mean, I was very clear. I said by the end of this year or the beginning of next year that they'll begin construction.
And how long will it, guesstimate-wise, take to complete?
I didn't ask that question.
How long is it?
How about if we find that out by next meeting? That's a
Doesn't change
15 seconds in here.
Change anything.
I actually went back and printed out the, for myself, I mean, 10 copies still, I'm not gonna bore you with it, I'm just gonna say it quickly, well, as quickly as I can. I remember in June or July with the minutes, we had Mr. Hughes, I believe, as the engineer in the city, came in and he was asked emphatically, do we have adequate water? He said, yeah, we have enough in wastewater sewage treatment plant and also in potable water to go to 2060, taking the growth of the city in perspective. The following month, and it's in the public record, I wasn't going to mention names, but it's in our public record in our minutes, is, I guess they're public record, is that true? Our minutes?
Yes, they're all-
Okay, fine, so I'll make sure if I say anything about it. Mr. Hill came in, I think he was a fire marshal,
Right.
right in this room, and he said, and Mr. Black, our chairman, asked him, do we have adequate water supply? Now, either he's totally inaccurate, was printed in front of me for our minutes, which we approved, hopefully that's not the case, and he said no. And so he said, and he mentioned, i.e. places like Bluewater Rise. But I know Mr. Thomas, who's a respected engineer in this town, and has been involved in all the, many of the subdivisions going up now. And as a realtor, I like these subdivisions. But I like to see them safe too. But that's where the confusion comes in. We heard one thing from the city engineer and another thing from the fire marshal. And these people went on their own, not their own. We told them to go out and they actually talked to the fire chief, was it, or the marshal?
It was cheap.
And I agree now with Travis. I don't know how we could actually have support of tabling it, but it puts them in a terrible position. But I don't think anything should move on from here point, not forever, I mean, from here on, without addressing these issues that the fire marshal brought up to us. And unfortunately, when we push things on to aldermen, they don't always take our suggestions. And like, for instance, about 3 years ago, I think right when I come on the committee, there was a thing about the, I'm wasting your time, I'm sorry, I'll finish just very quickly. There was a thing about the turnarounds in subdivisions. And we actually asked them to take that into account when they voted, and they just pushed that aside, I believe.
They did.
You're right. So when does it stop? What does this committee, actually, what do we represent? Because we seem to be just go bam, 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 sorry, and push it on, and then sometimes they don't even care what we say. So I think a planning and zoning committee should be something different, or board should be something different. That's getting off the subject now. But I sort of believe if we can get, as Travis said, I'd be in favor of pushing on, let them do this thing, but in the past, we had to, I think, hold a harder line for it.
So I'm going to be
I don't want
honest.
any places going to burn up.
This is just my thought, but obviously, again, this is not the final phase of Bluewater Rise. I think as Bluewater Rise goes on, I think the more microscoping we do to ensure future phases of this, that they do have the adequate water supply that they're going to require. You know, I have no reason not to doubt the city engineer. I don't have a reason to doubt what he's saying. I also don't have a doubt to doubt, Mr. Thomas. However, it is a concern. It's a valid concern. I would just like to see us approve this, but by the time in the next couple months, when the next phase of Bluewater Rise comes around,
We need some answers.
we need some answers, and I think that's a fair
I agree with you.
question.
But it's going to be the same situation.
Well,
It's going to pass,
Hopefully by that
unless
time
the
it won't
ordinance
be.
change, the same thing is going to happen.
Well,
But you're gonna get out in front of it before the next phase gets done.
I mean, is that a fair enough
I think
point
I think that's entirely reasonable as long, because what Jeff is telling us, the only impediment right now of completing that loop is this easement that the city has to get, is that correct?
That the final stage of the loop was securing an easement, correct, which may be done by now. The last I talked to Jordan, they were signing papers.
What about a water tower? Was that ever discussed? I think it was, right?
So the matter, I'm sorry, the matter before us
Right.
remains. We have an application before us for a final plan approval.
Yeah, but there's a,
There's no buts, Don. If we have an application, we have to act
you're
on it.
interrupting before I made my point. What Travis is arguing, we approved the plan as submitted tonight. But before it comes before us again, by that time, hopefully, the easement will be built in water, and that would satisfy those people who are concerned right now on this point.
I understand what you're saying,
But this one.
and so that's a discussion for another time, not for this application. We are bound to act on this application, by law, to act on this application. I mean, I don't know how many times the attorney can say that and I can say that. We have to do something with this
Raymond, we all
application.
agree with you on that. The
So,
point is, we need to get some way to move forward for the future as well. Let's go ahead and call, why don't you call question on this? And let's
well,
Let's
I
vote.
would,
Chair.
right.
Okay,
If
what
would
do you
you
guys get?
like to request a motion? I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay. I-
then we need to discuss going forward.
Okay, would you agree to that, Raymond? Oh, would you be comfortable, just I want to understand your thoughts exactly. If we are, I consider this application flawed because it wasn't accurate about the water safety, this development. Would you express any reservations going forward, now that you know that there's an issue with the water flow, right? If another similar application comes to us that is still working on getting an easement? Yeah.
Would I be comfortable having this same discussion about a future phase of this development?
Yeah,
Certainly.
if the water is not corrected. well,
Certainly.
You would have
To have a discussion about it? Absolutely.
not a discussion, would you have opposition to it?
Not if it meets the land use ordinance.
And that's my point.
And that's our point, land use ordinance is flawed, and if you're forced to vote for
So part of this process, it goes through departmental review.
the departmental
We-
review is flawed here.
Now you're interrupting me. So as a part of this process is it goes departmental review, all of the city departments review it, they provide a report to us. We have to base our decisions off of that information.
I'm not disagreeing.
By the way, the fire department is one of those departments.
Yeah, they thought the development would take much longer. They went out there and actually checked the flow rate. They discovered it was too low. But we don't know exactly the timetable when these different things were discovered. But we know as it stands today, if they build that construction, we pass it today and they don't get the easement through, it's going to be unsafe.
So I think from my point of view, if the city has a design in place for this project, and we're waiting on an easement, happens all the time in my world, I have absolutely no qualms about approving this application in that regard.
So are you telling me to my face that you have no qualms approving something that is inherently dangerous and people's lives are at risk?
I think that's a mischaracterization that is
I
inherently
don't see
dangerous.
this, I see the equivalency of it.
I mean, I think it is, but beside the point, I'm prepared to make a motion if you're prepared to call for one.
Okay, if I understood you correctly, as long as the paperwork is in order in front of you, you're willing to accept anything.
So
even if we find out information otherwise.
It's akin to a lot of things that happen in city development, city planning. So, this is one small piece, even though it's a 52 lot residential plan unit development, it's one small piece.
Yeah.
And the city has multiple plans going all over, and so one of them happens to be a water line extension to complete a loop for this area of the city.
You make it almost sound like it's the equivalency of somebody trying to put aluminum siding on a historic house downtown.
I don't think I made that analogy, but I guess what I'm saying is that there are always plans in the works, right, for all sorts of different things. I mean, whether it be stormwater, whether it be anything else. And I'll keep circling back to this because it's right here in this ordinance that we are required, this planning and zoning board, to act on an application when it comes before us. So we can choose to disapprove it if it doesn't meet the land use ordinance. We can approve it if it does, and we have the option to table it, but we have a limited period of time to deal with that, 60 days. And so what I'm saying is this application meets the requirements of the land use ordinance, and there is no reason for us to do that. I understand the concerns. I don't disagree with the concerns, but we have to look at this application on its merits.
Ms. Mosley,
Yes, sir.
if we approve a plan such as this, will we have concerns about the inherent safety of such a project based on what the fire department told us directly? If there is a disaster down the road, this is a hypothetical, I understand, are we in any way personally culpable for any disaster that happens? These members of the board who would be voting to approve it based on the paperwork being accepted?
Well, I can't provide legal advice to you all in your individual capacities. What I can say is if a government passes a law and a subsection of the government, such as the Planning and Zoning Board, fairly applies that law, there are protections for that entity.
Okay, and what does that mean exactly? There are protections. Does that mean the city's going to defend us in court personally?
There's this concept in the law called governmental immunity.
And
I'm
we
not
will-
saying I cannot give you all legal advice as to your individual capacity. That's outside of the purview of why I exist. What I can say is when you follow the law and you are acting under the color of a government entity, there are protections for that entity, such as governmental immunity.
Okay.
Fire chief's coming.
Excuse me?
Bobby Boyd's coming to answer all your questions about fire flow and what y'all talked about. If y'all just want to wait, he'll be here in a minute.
Yeah, because I don't see why we couldn't approve it as it's wrote, but before another phase is put it under the microscope, make our calls, make our complaints, see what we can get done before the
I think
next one
that's a
comes.
reasonable compromise.
That's the best thing I think that we could possibly do.
That's it, you know, just let us, as board members, make the phone calls, hello, answer our questions. That way we have it, we're out in front of a problem, if there's a problem, before the next one comes up. And we know there's gonna be more. Because that development's gonna be big.
It's going to be huge.
Well, that's one of the few places New can develop is down 17 and 70 rather. It's gonna happen.
Yeah, of course.
There's no if to it. And some of the stuff like this is going to be lovely developments, but they're going to take a lot of work. And what's going to happen if the city is not careful is going to be the same thing that happened in the largest city in North Carolina, where about 4 o'clock every afternoon when people in South Charlotte started turning their water faucets on, no water came out. 0 drips was it. They had to put a 4-foot water main in from the center of town out there.
4 foot?
4 foot. Right straight down Providence Road. Then they had to turn around and do the same thing again down Park Road to satisfy Valentine.
Yeah.
It's called poor planning.
Mr. Chair, is it your intention to recess this meeting briefly for the fire marshal to arrive?
He said he was going to be right here. I assumed he going to be here momentarily. If you want us to recess the meeting.
No, sir, it's
His
y'all's
questions
meeting.
and our questions and his answers don't pertain to what we've got right now. It pertains to going forward.
Yes.
Right,
I
I
think we
don't
might
think
go
it
ahead.
I don't think it
Can I finish,
changes,
please?
certainly.
I would like to see us go ahead and take a vote on this. Let Mr. Thomas please go home and have a drink, because he probably needs one. And then
Should've had
we
one
can
before
ask
I came.
fire marshal exactly what we need to. I think that's the smartest and most judicious way to act, but that's my personal opinion.
I agree
I agree.
completely.
So do I.
Act on this item, and then we can ask all the questions we'd like,
Exactly.
but they don't pertain to this particular application. We are bound to act on this application.
Okay, at this point, the chair would like to hear a motion to adopt the proposal as so presented to us, but we ask that the members of this board stay afterwards as we give the fire chief the courtesy of addressing our concerns, and to also alleviate, to free up Mr. John Thomas's time, so he can go home, and we're glad that he's aware that there's a problem here right now, and he knows what our concerns are, and I'm sure he respects them. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the final plan for Monitor Cape Phase 1 Bluewater Rise as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, second. Then we have a motion, it's been seconded. Nadia, can we have a roll call, please?
Yep. Don Black,
Yay.
Travis Oakley,
Yes.
Vernon Mason,
Yes.
Ann Schaff,
Yes.
Margie Dunn,
Yes.
Pat Darcy,
Yes.
Sunny Aluso.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Mr. Thomas, thank you. Thank you for hearing our
Well,
concerns.
I'll be out fire full and hydrants tomorrow. Question, the fire marshal is coming?
Yes.
I'll be glad to stick around for that.
Appreciate it.
You certainly may.
You probably should.
But probably can wait a few more hours.
Make it that much better.
We're all gonna go next.
Party's still on.
You don't have to go home, we're gonna
We're
go
going
all
to be going
together.
over what we're waiting on and get the planning board meetings approved.
Yes.
And you do the calendar.
So all we have to do is talk to the fire marshal and adjourn. This is sort of our question period at that point, is that
Yes, this
correct?
is our question, we're in our question period right now. We already approved the past minutes.
How about the
Now, this
calendar?
is
Oh, the calendar.
see.
Oh, the
The
calendar,
calendar.
yes. Okay. Sonny, did you have a chance to review the
I
calendar?
know, I knew you were gonna come to me. Every year, the first Tuesday in August is
National Night Out.
National Night Out, and I would like to move it to Thursday or Wednesday or whatever is comfortable.
And do you know what date that would be?
Well, it's the second, August 2nd is the Tuesday, so August 4th would be the Thursday.
Well, they have a plan for August 16th.
No, that's the submission date, the deadline for the September meeting.
Oh, okay.
Jeff, what is your schedule?
We always make this change for Sunny.
Yeah.
I don't know what the new chief is gonna do.
We actually thought of changing it beforehand.
Well, I was wondering why we didn't.
But I just, you wanted to hear me talk, because I was,
Yeah, we just
okay.
want to make sure you were paying attention.
Well, you gotta give him the opportunity to see his piece, right?
Nah, I don't care, I think he's a great, I said, no.
Did you want to see it?
So what do you prefer? Third, fourth, what?
Always does it, whatever y'all decide.
Thursday.
The Thursdays are always better, since
Alright.
I don't have any
That's what
standing
I'm gonna put it right
night
there.
meetings on Thursdays.
So
Right,
Thursday is
Thursdays are
the,
other
that's the 4th, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
It's
so
done.
we're proposing to change to August 4th.
Yes.
Is there any other comments or concerns about the calendar for next year?
No,
At this
not here
point,
anyway.
at this point, the chair would like to entertain a motion to approve the amended calendar for meetings, whereby we are changing the August 2nd to the August 4th of 2022.
So I'll make that note.
We have a motion, is that motion seconded?
Second.
Motion seconded.
We can do it.
No, so we've got it, so at this point, we can close the meeting now?
Are we gonna
We're gonna
vote on
vote.
the
Vote.
motion?
I don't, okay, can we roll, Nadia, could we please have a roll call?
Yep. Don Black,
Yay.
Travis Oakley,
Yes.
Vernon Mason,
Yes.
Ann Schaff,
Yes.
Margie Dunn,
Yes.
Pat Darcy,
Yes.
Sunny Aluso.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Get some.
We're going, are we keeping the meeting open for Mr. Board to come up?
Yeah, you can close it and have a conversation or whatever you want to do.
I think it's better to have,
It will be
on the record,
if we
have
close
the
it.
conversation, so we will keep the meeting on.
Right, we have a quorum, so I don't think we can sit here without being an open meeting.
So,
Is he bringing sandwiches?
Everybody put your phone out and check your email while you're waiting.
I just changed the date.
We have time for a quick
All
question.
this-
Yeah. I thought it was at the firehouse, but it's not.
at this,
It says you right here.
at this point, I'd like to call for a 5-minute recess. So, is there anybody who wishes to attend? I don't think we have to have a vote on that.
Probably should, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Motion in a second.
So moved.
Everyone say aye.
There you go, I'll say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
You might have been home for it.
So he's got to wait his time. He's gonna come to Bern.
Is the door unlocked for him?
Yes.
You have the flow data with a map with the hydrants that they flowed? You have that you can share with me?
I don't
Just,
have
was
that,
it
but-
just a CFM, a volume? Is that what we?
All he talked to us about was CFM and the fact that it was so reduced.
Okay.
And quite frankly, Raymond, all of this backs up to National Forest.
Sure.
What happens if the forest catches on fire? I mean, you know, these are all what ifs, but it's a viable what if.
Yeah, I mean, what happens if the water tower falls down? Right?
Everybody will get out and watch it.
Yeah, but that-
Everybody will get wet. So, I mean,
But this area does have great capacity for great forest fires, though. I mean, that's not a ridiculous concern.
It's something though that needs to be addressed. You heard me say about Charlotte and the lack of water flow there. With everything that is coming on in the city in the next little while, if one sale of one property goes through, Newbern is going to explode. And that's going to mean that much more marching down 70.
Do you have the, Nadia, do you have the minutes for the last meeting from this time that were approved?
I can get them from
Multitasking, I like it.
So, Raymond, that, not that they're not doing their job, but with the explosive growth that we're probably going
Sure.
to have, this is a valid concern.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I'm less concerned, only because the profession I'm in, we see this sort of stuff all the time, so it really doesn't throw up any red flags for me. It's this sort of stuff happens all the time.
You know, it's interesting though, because my husband is an engineer, built buildings and did site plans for IBM. And then the reason we got down here is he sold the wastewater expansion for City of Newbern in the early 90s. So he understands this, and I've sat down and had many conversations with him about this.
Okay, so they're in recess, so they'll come back in. And,
Chief?
How's everybody?
Good, about you?
I want to thank you for making yourself available.
Not a problem, Don.
I'm here for.
We have the engineer representing the development here as well, and he was unaware of any kind of water pressure, water flow rate problem there.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I hate to interrupt, but are we back in the meeting now? Are we back
Let's
to
get
order?
back into order. Yeah.
I would like to call recess over and bring this meeting back to order. The meeting's back to order, so that what you say today is going to be part of the public record and reported in our meeting minutes. Thank you for coming, Mr. Chief, on such short notice, and we've had worked our way through approval of the final phase of an additional unit, and we're most concerned that the easement is adopted, approved through the Forest Trust, I believe, is the agency. The concern that it's supposed to be issuing the easement, and in everybody's opinion,
that will help us with getting the water flow rate to the point where it's safe for all parties concerned and complies more with the accepted flow rates for developments of this size. As we know right now, we are told that they're working through the final parts of getting that easement, and they hope to have construction ongoing sometime starting the early part of this coming year. And that should be a solution, a remedy for the problem that you currently experience with them. Is there anything you can add to that? Are you part of those negotiations for the easement?
Yeah, I'm not negotiation side of it, but I have been a part of that with Jordan is working that out and trying to make that plan come to fruition. And it's actually gaining some really good traction and moving forward. And I want to first say, you know, as we discussed before when you guys came by the firehouse to talk to me, I appreciate you guys being proactive. I do. Because proactive is a great thing because we need to be more proactive. And with that being said, you know, there's a fine line between, you know, having what you really need and be able to work with what you have. Just like I explained to you before, we've got water out there. Is it meeting NFPA requirements in the backside of it? Not exactly, but we are working together towards making that occur.
Yes.
But I want to make sure everyone around this table understands it's not going to stop us from fighting fire. It's not going to stop us from having an adequate source. The difference is we may have to have other options, but that doesn't mean that we cannot protect the homes that are out there. Now, the best case scenario as this development grows out, yes, is to get 1,000 gallons a minute out there, and that second water line will help accomplish that. But in the meantime, there's not a dire need for us to panic or to be concerned that we're not being able to do our job in that area.
Would that, as it is, if the water rate is not up to the accepted NFPA standards, is the NFPA? Does
the NFPA, understand, is a recommendation, and that's what we shoot for.
And does that impact people's fire insurance at all?
No, that's great. The water is graded, and we actually in reality, the water system graded better than the fire department. We've got a great water system. And I think that, like I told y'all before, what's happening is the growth of that area has just taken off more quickly than everybody anticipated.
Yes.
So the plans have been in place all along to do this. But because of that, it's expedited it, and we've created ways of us to find ways of getting that water source in there. But again, it's not going to stop us because you go outside this city and you go to some of these rural areas and they use tankers. They don't even have 500 gallons of water. And their hydrants may be miles apart. And they'll have bring in the tanker system. And we already have mutual aid in place. So even if it was a situation, there's so many options. It's not going to stop. Again, I appreciate you being proactive, and I appreciate your concern. But that makes me feel like I got somebody in our corner helping us make sure these things are occurring. But they are occurring. It may not be happening as fast as we'd like it to. But again, I think the area expanded a whole lot quicker than anybody ever anticipated. The whole city has. It's just blowing up.
When did you first discover the actual flow water rate out at the Bluewater Rise development?
I don't know exactly. I'd have to look back at my records and find that out.
But was this something fairly?
And it's still okay. We're talking about, probably 300 to 400 gallons a minute is all we're talking about. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about 200 gallons compared to 1,000 gallons. So there's water there. But if we were to have a major flagration of a fire or something, that's when but there's also other methods, like I say. There's other ways we can do things, But right now, I don't, and I've been the chief now 6 years, been in the department 32, and I would not put my neck out on the line if I felt like there was a situation there that was darn. Again, I appreciate, like we talked, we're at fire. I appreciate you guys being proactive because we need a little bit thinking proactive because as the city is growing, we need to be thinking about these things. But I would not sit here and tell you that it was a dire need if it wasn't.
I think we understand that, and what we want to be planning for is when divide that line when you pass the line where there's not enough water. We want to not.
I don't think we're there yet.
No, we understand that, but we don't want to get there.
And I agree. I mean, and I don't have a problem going to these meetings sometimes when a situation like this comes up, to be able to explain from our side of it and how we look at things. But
So
right
this-
now, I
this
just,
new water line, will that, do you know how that's going to affect you, in years to come there?
oh, when you look at a water system, and again, I'm not the expert, I just know it from the fire protection side of things. When you look at water, if you take your water hose, you lay your water hose out, you got a certain amount of water coming out the end of it. Well, if you start robbing from that, it starts robbing from people all along the line, okay? So what you do to fix that is you bring in another loop to tie in, and that's what's happening. So it's not that the water's not there.
No,
It's
I
just
understand.
if we were to have a major situation, then that's where the 1,000, and again, NFPA is a recommendation. That's what we shoot for. That's what we would like to have. That's like having all the apples in a cart and being happy. But that doesn't mean we cannot perform our job. And number one, it does not mean that people in that area are not protected equally as somebody else.
How many more phases of that subdivision can be built without that loop being done? Before you get to a point
I
where
honestly
you're
would not,
comfortable?
I don't think it's going, because right now, we've been back to the backside of it. It might not have been turned on, but there have been some flows done. I'd have to go back and look at my records and tell you exactly. But right now, I don't think it's going to, a problem is going to be an issue for us right now. And we're moving along with the
When
other
we say
side.
right now, what does right now mean? Today, this phase, the next 3 phases?
I think if you look at that entire property out there,
So if it was once built out?
again, whether it's 700 gallons, 500 gallons, 600 gallons, we still can perform our job. It's just not.
Just pulled from other resources,
That's correct.
tankers and other things? Okay.
Mr. Thomas, how many more phases are there of Bluewater Rise?
On Monitor, we have another phase that we're starting to build now, which is the small lots. We're under construction now on another phase of what's called Hutton, which is the large 20,000 square foot lots. That's being built now, and then there's another phase of it. We've just been given authorization to move forward with the rest of the property, which is probably in the neighborhood of 350 or so lots, which is right good ways down the road. But I've been told to keep 100 lots ahead of this developer, and we've been pretty much doing that. So they're moving right along pretty good. I think we were looking at a 15 or 20 year build out at one time, and we probably won't hit the 15 with the number of lots that we're talking in there. I'll be home by the time they build the next house in there.
To your knowledge, what is coming down the road on that 70 corridor in the way of new development?
In the city, nothing that I'm aware of. There are some developments that are in the county on the county water system, and they have no fire protection. I mean, we put hydrants in there, but they fight fires differently than the city of New Bern does. And we run these models to predict what the hydrant flow is, and we target 1,000, and we hit it pretty close in the development. But if the development takes 2 or 3 years, the development itself is not robbing from that, but development occurring in other places in the city could be robbing from that.
That's why I was asking you, because it all pulls off the same
So
water supply.
when we go into the next, working on the section out, I mean, it'll take us 6 months to get to the point where we're ready to submit anything probably. We'll revisit those models and rerun them. We don't model the whole city, and I think Jordan may have the whole city, but I don't know. What we do, we go out and we pick a couple of hydrants that we're tying into, and we flow those, and that is what we include in our model to predict what's going to happen in the subdivision. And that's the best that we can do, right now. But with this conversation, I'm going to go flow some hydrants tomorrow out of Bluewater to see what's out there. And there's other things that come into play too when you flow a hydrant, as well as the time of day, it's a tank full, is it half empty, and that sort of thing. So it's kind of like it's dynamic in such a way.
So if I may, so from looking through this discussion from the lens point of view of the Planning and Zoning Board, the information that comes before us when a PUD application comes to us or anything like that is a departmental review. So if on the departmental review, the fire department says, good to go, then we should take that on face value is what you're telling us. Okay, and that's the way I would, that's what we want to hear, is that if every department says we're good to go, then we should trust that information as true and good and trust our city officials and carry on. And that's what, I mean, that's what we are obligated to do as planning and zoning board members. If there's a problem with that is not something that we can take up.
This is not uncommon. We work in about 8 or 10 counties, and we run into this quite a bit. And there's, let's say we can't get but 850 gallons out of a hydrant when we run our model. And to say that, like the town of Winterville wants 1,000, they're not going to stop a 200 lot development because of 150 gallons. And so they acknowledge that, and the fire marshal has discretion to be able to accept that. But the other thing too, if you can't send the water to me, I can't deliver it, and that has a little bit to do with it too. Sure. And they realize that. But it's not anything uncommon with the city. And even we run into that quite a bit, even in wastewater treatment too. I mean, we're permitting projects that the municipality may not have line capacity, but they have a plan in place and acknowledge that to the state, and eventually within some period of time it gets done, as long as there's a plan in place.
You make a good point. In the plan review, if we did not see that second line come in, we would be screening the plan review.
Right. Ms. Bullock-Mosley, why was the issue of multiple entrance separation had to be more fixed? And now I hear that the fire marshal says, well, we can ignore the recommendation from the organization that mandated 1,000 gallons per minute flow rate. Why is that not arbitrary and capricious, yet the Director of Development Service would be arbitrary and capricious on the separation of entrances and egresses?
There's no law, excuse me, that says that you have to follow the recommendation of some advisory organization somewhere in the world. So city officials have discretion in applying which standards that are recommended by these entities that they'd like to apply, using their professional skills and expertise.
Okay, so I still don't understand exactly why one has to be fixed.
Laws have to be fixed. Laws have to be objective.
Well,
Laws have to be...
why weren't we able to have at least 2 entrances?
You may be able to. It's my understanding that Mr. Layton and others are working on a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen that they may adopt.
No,
so that's entirely within possibility.
Have you had time to review what the work group worked on?
The last conversation I had was in the work group, which I believe was last week. I have not received any other information after that.
Okay, and you're waiting to get that from the planning department?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So my understanding is that we're supposed to have construction start very soon. Do you know what's involved, Chief Boyd, with getting this easement and why it's been taking such a long time? The engineering developing the completed loop, I imagine they were looking at some kind of maps and where to draw the thing from. How long has this easement application been going on? Do you have any idea?
The city, or did you have any?
The
water line, the city doesn't work, or you have something to do?
Are there troubles where
And we're talking, what kind of easement are we talking about?
I'm not exactly sure what kind of easement we are talking about. We're talking about making the loop of light whereupon the...
Oh, you're talking about for the water?
Yeah.
That would be a Jordan question.
They know what they need.
But that's been going on for some time already.
Yeah, but it's been expedited.
I'm sure it'll happen.
Eventually.
We just want to make things as safe as reasonably possible.
And again, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the opportunity to come here and kind of give you my viewpoint, but again, I think there's a difference between dire and having the cream of the crop. And the cream of the crop is 1,000 gallons. Right now, I don't think we're at a dire state.
And any kind of water supply would be augmented by pumper trucks, a tanker truck?
I don't, that's an option, that's not exactly.
It's like I said.
Right
this is a
now,
city problem. This is
we have enough fire flow, but if we were to have a major,
what he's done.
Yeah, I'm thinking of
we have
forest
other
fire.
options, is what I was trying to say to you. You know, go back to what I was saying, you know, we're very blessed in the city to have a great water system.
Excuse me.
They actually graded better than the fire department.
That's right. They need to.
So we got a great water system in place and a great planning in place for it all.
Sacred cow.
But if you go outside these city limits,
Everybody wants to
it's
raise
like
public
Thomas was
be 11
stating,
years and
it's
eight.
completely different. But we have mutual aid packs at all those departments. If something was to, I mean, we don't know, might go out there tomorrow and the water system, for some reason, fails. You have to always have options. So, I mean, you look at all your options whenever you're doing that, but right now, we feel like at this point in time, we're okay, especially with the plans in place that we have.
So if there's a fire, let's say at the adjoining forest, you have plans to address a major.
Number one, that's Troy Dance, that's gonna be national forest. We'd actually be a resource helping them.
And you do have emergency plans to confront
Yes,
such a
sir.
fire?
Yes, sir, we do.
And your water sourcing might include tank, what do you call it, tank trucks? I think in New York we call them pumper trucks.
They're tankers, you know, and again, it's all in what you require, but because we have such a great water system, we're not required to have tankers. But, you know, you don't ever have, so you create mutual aid packs with other departments, because again, water system can fail, anything can fail. And you need to have plan B for everything, so we've got to.
So you might reach out to Vanceboro for assistance or things like that?
Well, typically we pick the departments that are close to, like Township 7, number 6 Department, 31. We have mutual aid packs with all those, and we have response maps in place, so then, like if we hit a second alarm, they would automatically be dispatched.
Okay, we're a lot smarter than we were.
Thanks for coming down, Chief. We appreciate
Not a
your
problem.
time and candor.
Anytime, I mean, anytime, you know, I would rather come here and answer a question for you than you what if it. You know, hear it from the expert, but I would also, especially if it's all about water system, have Jordan here at the same time. If you're concerned about water, I'll talk to you about the fire side, he can talk to you about the water side.
Fair enough. Appreciate it. Thanks,
Y'all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, I'd like to hear a motion to adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Nadia, vote please.
Don Black,
A.
Travis Oakley.
Yes.
Raymond Lacy,
Yes.
Ann Shaw,
Yes.
Margie Dunn,
Yes.
Pat Darcy,
Yes.
Sunny Lizzo.
No, I want to stay.
We are adjourned.